The Knee Jerks have woken up from their food coma, so that means it's time for the Knee Jerks, Detroit Sports Talk with Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al of the equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. And normally this is where I would say, and my partner in crime, Greg Eno, joins us. But once again, Greg has remained on hiatus. He's got some things to take care of at home. He's likely going to be back for the next episode. So until that time, he's been Wally pipped, essentially, or Drew Bledsoe, or whatever you want to call it. And Nick Milanovich, who was with us on the last show, is joining us again to talk about the last couple weeks of Detroit sports and whatever else is on our mind. Nick, how are things up in the Pacific Northwest?
Oh, they're doing great, Al. It's good to be chatting Detroit sports with you. And I'm sitting here at home nice and warm. We had actually a snowfall, which surprised me. And it won't last very long, but it's enjoyable and peaceful when it comes. So
yeah. Oh, yeah. So you haven't run into Jeff Bezos or say who else? Bill Gates Paul Allen or any of those guys out there?
Well, Paul Allen's dead, so no, I have not.
Shoot. Steve Ballmer, that's who I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Oh, Ballmer?
Yeah, he's probably down in L.A. with his Clippers. So
honestly, I'd love to meet him. He's a Detroiter.
Really? I didn't realize that.
He went to Country Day. His father was an exec at Ford. So, yeah.
Today I learned, as they would say. But as always, now obviously since Greg's not here and some of the bits are his baby, like the birthday game, we'll save that till 2 weeks from now. And so essentially, Nick and I are just going to get right to the meat of the podcast. We have a lot to cover. Obviously, we had Thanksgiving Day of the Lions and more moral victories. We had the Wolverines and Ohio State, or probably the Ohio State. I want to make sure I get that correct. Had a big rivalry game, I should say the game Saturday, which I think went in a way no one really truly expected. So we'll touch on that. Obviously, we got some Tigers news as we talked about on the last podcast. They were going to have to make some roster decisions. Well, those decisions got made over the past 10 days or so. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And if we got time, we'll touch on some Pistons, Red Wings, and whatever the hell else we feel like talking about. So with that, Nick, are you ready to hit the ground running?
Let's rock and roll.
All right. Well, since we're just a few days past Thanksgiving, we might as well start with the annual tradition here in Detroit, and that would be the Thanksgiving Day game. This year, it was the Lions playing the Buffalo Bills, a legitimate Super Bowl contender with a legitimate all-pro elite quarterback in Josh Allen. Well, as usual, they lost. But they did take the Bills to the limit. It was a 28-25 loss. The Lions fell on a last-second field goal. And Nick what constantly overrides the stories, but I think we should be we'll touch on what we should be talking more about were some of the questionable game management and clock management by Dan Campbell at the end of each half, and the controversial failed 3rd and 1 pass call that essentially set up the Bills getting the ball back to win the game. All I've heard about in Detroit since has been fans and media trotting out the moral victory card. I mean, I hear some sample headlines. Most of these are from the Free Press. I think one or two might be from the Detroit News. But here's the first one. Headline. This is the lead. Forget the loss. These Detroit Lions have playoff potential despite Bills' win. Detroit Lions aren't the same old. Saying otherwise misses how they played versus a contender. Curses! Taylor Decker is right about these new and improved Detroit Lions. Taylor Decker after loss to Bills. This isn't the, as they said, bleep, same old Lions. Well, he said fucking same old Lions. All right, Nick. We're both relatively older guys. We've been around the block a few times when it comes to the Lions. And doesn't this seem all very, very familiar? Every couple years, there's a game like this where the Lions play a very good team, tough, then fall short. Either like we saw it a couple years, 3 years ago to be exact, with the Kansas City Chiefs game in 2019, early in that season, early in the tenure of Matt Patricia, as a matter of fact. The Lions took the Chiefs down to the wire. The Chiefs got a touchdown on I believe, like a 95-yard punt. A fumble return. Lions lost in a very, very a very disappointing last-second loss to the Chiefs. And I swear, I saw those same headlines 3 years ago under a different regime. And here we are again, 3 years later, new regime. And we're still talking about a team that lost the game. Even though they did win 3 in a row, they still lost the game. A game that was very variable, very, very winnable. I think that's obviously the most frustrating part. And they're still 4-7 on the little periphery of the wild card race. I mean, they're like the last team. When they put up the graphic, the Lions are the last team you'll see on the graphic at 4-7. So, I'm tired. I'm a 60-year-old man. I've been a fan of the Lions for 50 of those years, and I've lost track of the moral victories. I hate being called a same old Lions fan, but I've been there, done that. I've seen this before, Nick.
I would say the same thing. I think if you count up all of their moral victories, they have probably an over 700 record in moral victories. And whereas like Super Bowl teams probably have like a 100 record in moral victory. They don't need them. And I was thinking about all this moral victory stuff, and I think I was trying to find the clip, but I think I remember hearing Chuck Noll from the old Pittsburgh Steelers from the 70s fame.
Right.
He was asked a question about moral victories, and he just flat out said, moral victories are for losers.
Yep.
And end of story. And
like Bill Parcells said, you are what your record says you are, essentially.
And it's true. It's like a moral victory means nothing. It doesn't add to your win column. It doesn't get you in the playoffs. It gives you a warm and fuzzy feeling. Now, and it's especially true, I would say, in the pros and maybe even in college. If you're talking about moral victories, and I think there's other kinds of things that you could happen, but that's all little league, if you ask me. It's not the pros. You're either going to win and get enough wins to get into the playoffs, or you're not. And there's another thing I think good teams do that lousy teams do not.
Yeah.
They win close games. They know how to kind of slow everything down and grind away and win close games. And because you're going to have many more close games than you will have blowouts.
Right.
The
NFL, people say, it's a one-score game. Almost every NFL game is a one-score game. People never add that. The fans never add that part. The NFL teams rarely get blown out. It's always a 1-2 score game at most.
Which tells you one other thing, that after quarterback, your probably most valuable player should be your place kicker.
Yeah.
Because if you remember the Lions game, the game starts early for me out here in the Pacific Northwest, so I'm kind of like prepping a turkey dinner while watching this game. But someone said their field goal kicker missed like a 29-yard field goal.
He did.
And what was funnier is that I think it was like Tony Romo or whoever it was talking about that the Lions kicker trademarked his last name like Money Badger. And I'm like, based on what? Like, kicking something that's like 25 yards away? It's like, and what did they lose by? 3 points.
Right.
So at the very end.
Yeah.
So that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it's part of the bigger problem. It's like, I don't know, the Lions have had their heads up their butts when it comes to having a reliable kicker. And,
Michael Badgley is the name of the kicker. So Money Badger. Oh my God.
Money Badger. Yeah. Just like, I couldn't believe it. Like, seriously, like that's all fluff based on that game. So,
it's oh my goodness. But yeah, it's
But back to your moral victory thing. It's like,
go ahead.
There's nothing, you're trying to look for positives. And I will say there are positives. They fought, they kept a close game. But, clock management killed it. not able to stop Josh Allen, and Diggs at the very end also killed it.
Right.
But so did, letting giving up a safety.
Yeah.
In the, your third down and you just get
and he
stuffed.
was in the shotgun to boot, and he still,
Yeah.
get rid of the damn ball.
That's right. And so, there are other places where they just kind of like missed,
Mm-hmm.
and it really cost them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Because I know that before halftime, the CBS crew, specifically Tony Romo, was just railing on the clock management, saying they don't need to snap the ball. Let the clock run out. Let it go to the 2-minute warning, I should say. They had plenty of time. They had plenty of time on the play clock. They had no reason to rush some plays. And apparently, Dan Campbell's reasoning was he wanted to score, get a stop, and score again. So he was rushing, he was not concerned about saving clock, which seems like kind of a silly way to play against a Super Bowl contender. And obviously it backfired because they didn't score. They had the punt, and they gave up a field goal to end the half. Again, there's another 3-point exchange right there where the Lions weren't able to score. Bills came back and kicked a field goal before the end of the half. Again, and there's that 3-point margin again you're talking about. Or now we're up to 6. But yeah, it was between that and then I'm still not sure what exactly they were thinking on the 3rd and 4th down calls under about, under 40 seconds to go there, between the long pass on 3rd and 1 and then electing to kick the 51-yard field goal with a field goal kicker they apparently don't trust, even though he's got a name that's trademarked. But which he did hit, but he missed from 29 earlier, shorter than a extra point. But, I guess, and again, Campbell said we didn't want to leave much time on the clock. Well, they ended up leaving 23 seconds. And if you're a Lions fan, we have seen Matthew Stafford do the same exact thing Josh Allen did, where that's more than enough time to get 40 yards of a quarterback like that. We've seen Stafford do it countless times. And Allen did it with essentially one pass. He had him right in field goal range. He hit a 36-yard pass right down the middle. And it helped that they could throw a pass down the middle because they had all their timeouts because of the weird-ass clock management that the Lions had in their previous possession. So they could throw the ball down the middle. They could throw the ball deep. They were able to stop the clock. Obviously, they got well within field goal range, kicked a game winner of 2 seconds to go. And this is so similar to the Minnesota game where they butchered the clock management and allowed the Minnesota to do essentially the same thing.
Yeah, and if you think about it, that clock management would have been manipulating that would have been very helpful for them for another reason too. Because otherwise you're going head to head, your team who has a poor defense against their like top rated offense or like near the top, they're going to beat you out.
Yeah.
And your offense against their top rated defense, you're in a weaker position on both sides of the ball. So you got to, if you get a lead, you got to mess around other ways, and just kind of like really put them in a bind. And that goes back to really working the clock versus trying to go head to head on every play.
Yeah.
And basically run more plays.
Yeah.
Or let them run more plays.
Yeah. Yeah. And what kind of got me, especially with the 3rd and 1 pass, well, other than the fact that there was either communication between Goff and Chark or Goff just made a horrible pass, is if you're going to make that play call, I think the obvious follow-up would have been you go for it on 4th and 1 if you're going to make that call. I mean, that because then you get the clock running again, you force them to take timeouts, and then you got Jamal Williams, who's been money in short yardage. I mean, he leads the league in touchdowns, almost every one of them coming from inside the 5. And yet they elect to kick at the 51-yard field goal. The play calling, I can understand going for the dagger, but not with Jared Goff. He's proven I don't think he's that quarterback. Jared Allen, Josh Allen on the other hand, I could understand making that call. But you have a wide receiver who has missed like 4 games and had his first game back and has been fairly unproductive in his season so far. Then you got Goff, who is not known for being the most clutch quarterback, as we've seen a few times this season. That was just a horrible, horrible play. Because I'm sitting there watching it in real time, and when they cut the Chark running downfield, I blurred out, "He's open," and he literally had a couple steps on the DB, and he has his arm in the air, calling for the ball, and Goff throws a fade, essentially 5 yards short of Chark, at least 5 yards short of Chark, and well towards the sideline when he should have aired it out and thrown it to the inside of the field, inside the hashes, so to speak. And oh my God, it's like that was just so Lions. The play was there. They act, and apparently, if going up for what I saw on some replays and guys like Bill Barnwell on Twitter, there was like 2 or 3 guys open on that play. Amon-Ra St. Brown was open down the middle of the field for a first down. It was, and sure, he went for the hero ball. And I guess the most frustrating part is the hero ball was there, but he just wasn't capable of making the throw.
Yeah, I was thinking about that one too. And when I saw that he was throwing to Chark, I said, oh no.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because I have no faith that Chark reminds me of the Lions passing game from the 80s. Like you just chuck the ball to any one of those and they all had stone hands.
Yeah, Circus Kirkus or someone like that, yeah.
Yeah, and like every one of them, I used to remember they would always drop the ball. It was a nightmare. And I don't know if it's Goff, I don't know if it's Chark, or just the 2 of them. I don't think they ever connect. It always looks ugly.
Yeah, they really have not shown much in the way of chemistry at all this year, at all.
Not at all.
And then you got Amon-Ra, who's been unstoppable, essentially.
And that's what I was thinking. It's like, if you desperately need that 1 yard, you either give it to Williams to punch it in for like 1 extra yard.
Right.
And you keep the thing alive.
Yep. You still have your own timeouts and you can call it and you stop the clock. Yeah.
That's right. Or you give it to St. Brown, who does have good hands. He's a good receiver.
He's a very good receiver.
And like, why would you not send it to him where these 2 together, Goff and Chark, just like, it's always been a disaster.
Yeah.
And Goff hasn't been that much better with Raymond, and a little bit better, but
yeah,
I think their only decent receiver is St. Brown, to be honest. So
yeah,
very reliable.
Right, he's even though he mostly works out of the slot, he is the number 1 guy. There's no question about that. He's tracking towards 1,000-yard year, and he is their number 1 weapon. And why you should be looking for him first, and really looked like Goff locked in on Chark. He goes, I'm going for the hero ball, and that's what he threw.
Yeah, I mean, like, who did Allen go to in crunch time?
Yeah,
Diggs.
Why?
Yep. Like, is it?
Yeah, I believe Diggs had 4 catches in the fourth quarter. That was his target. No, he's easily their best wide receiver. Exactly. That drives it home right there, and that kind of leads to the other thing we're going to lean on here about between the quarterback play, is that we're seeing a lot of Lions fans saying, well, Goff is good enough. Well, I think on Thanksgiving, we saw the difference between being an average NFL quarterback and then being an elite NFL quarterback, and specifically on those last 2 drives. We just talked about how Goff butchered what should have been a touchdown. At the very least, should have had him been near the goal line if he hits that pass. Meanwhile, you got Josh Allen, who, along with making plays with his legs that Goff can't make, the first play with 23 seconds left, and they need about 40 some yards to get in field goal range. The first play is a 36-yard laser to Diggs.
And
they're already essentially in field goal range after 1 play. Yes. And Allen gets, I think he had a run, put him right where they want the ball. Game's over. And they kick the field goal. And that is the difference between having an average NFL. I mean, Goff is an NFL quarterback. He is an NFL quarterback. I don't think there's any question about that. But him and comparing him to Josh Allen, it's like completely two different levels of play. I guess I'll put it that way. And Allen is playing hurt. Supposedly he has a bad elbow, and he's still pulling off these plays. And and Goff has had a couple of near bad blunders. He's almost good for one boneheaded near pick or pick in whenever he plays. So that kind of leads us to, we have the fans saying, oh, he's good enough, and the Lions just need to draft defense. But all of a sudden, you look at the Rams, and talk about the going sideways, the wheels coming off, the season just blowing up. You got Matthew Stafford's in concussion protocol. Apparently, when he got hit, the last time he got hit, he lost feeling in his legs. That's bad. Cooper Kupp has a badly injured ankle and might be done for the season. I know Aaron Donald is hurt and may not play next week. They have a couple other important starters they're really banged up. They have a bad offensive line. Their starting quarterback is maybe out for the season. If they were smart, they would just leave him be. Stafford could actually use a year just to heal up, because we saw this with him with the Lion trying to play through stuff, and he's a shadow of the player when he tries to do that. So all of a sudden, that first-round pick that I think most of us figured would be, if they're lucky, in the mid-20s, now sits at number 30 overall. And it's literally trending towards it could be a top 5 pick. Maybe even, like I said, maybe could end up being at the very least number 2, maybe. That's how bad the Rams season is going. Hell, if you saw the highlights, even Sean McVay almost got concussed by his own player.
Oh, I did see that. Yeah. He got knocked pretty good.
He got KO. He hit him so hard.
I know.
So here we are. The Lions going to have, I think saying right now, I think they have the number 13 and the number 3 pick in the draft. And we've just been railing about how Jared Goff is he's an NFL quarterback, but he's probably not. I won't say probably. I think it's pretty. You could be assured he's not the guy to get you over the hump. I mean, there's reasons why the Rams traded him. I mean, you need for him to take you where you want to go, you have to have the perfect team around him. And the Lions are not the perfect team, and it's almost impossible to build. And with that number 3 pick, all of a sudden, the 2 top quarterbacks in college football look like they would be in play between Alabama's Bryce Young or the Ohio State's C.J. Stroud. I'll
add in a third one is the University of Washington's.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Sorry, I was going to add a third one. The University of Washington's quarterback, too, is I hear a little more noise about him. So
yeah. It's Penix, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Michael Penix Jr. As what is RG3 said during one of his games, he's got that Penix energy, so to speak. He loves the innuendos, but yeah, I've seen a few of his games. I don't think he's going to go high first round, but I could definitely see. I would not be upset if the Lions drafted a player like him, with one of their lower picks, like a second day pick. Because I don't think he's I don't think they're going to make him a first round pick. But you never know. I mean, especially with how things would go in the combine and stuff like that. Regardless, there's a couple. Like I said, there's more than just those 2 guys. There's Hooker out of Tennessee. You said Penix out of Washington. You got Levis out of Kentucky. There's a couple other guys out there. The guy who really wants a kid from USC. Was it Caleb Williams? That kid is. I watched him just eviscerate Notre Dame on Saturday night, and if he was coming out this year, I'd say that's the guy you want. Trade both those picks to get that guy. But regardless of that, there are going to be some good quarterbacks available. Yet we have a fan base that's going to be screaming defense. But they have to remember, regardless, the most valuable player on the field is the quarterback. And you always hear, Nick, the guys say, well, yeah, and Tom Brady was in the 6th round and Russell Wilson was in the 3rd round. And, they always name the outliers, that's what gets me. Well, they go, yeah, you can find a guy in the later rounds, but you have to be very, 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 very lucky. And that doesn't happen as often as these fans make it out to be. So this has got to be the year to take a quarterback, just because if the Lions are going to improve as fast or continue on their upward trajectory as many of the fans, and for that matter, media and talking heads think they're going to, this is essentially their last chance to get a quarterback without having to start worrying about signing one for huge money in free agency like a Lamar Jackson. He's going to get $250,000. Or you have to trade half your draft picks like the Rams did to get Matthew Stafford. So if you're going to take a quarterback, this has got to be the year. And I think what people kind of also tend to forget, Nick, the last time the Lions took a quarterback in the first 2 days of the draft was Matthew Stafford 13 years ago. They've taken a handful of quarterbacks since, but they've all been, 5th, 6th, 7th round guys. Like Jake Rudolph, for example. Loves him in Michigan, but he's not an NFL quarterback. So this is I think the argument should be: do you keep Goff for an extra year and then let the new guys sit, rather than do you just draft a QB at all? I think in a perfect world, you keep Goff. He at least starts the season as your starter, and then you have the heir apparent sitting there, kind of like the Packers do right now with Jordan Love.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, like with Goff, and when he first joined the Lions, like, okay, let's see what he looks like when his head coach doesn't hate him and is much more supportive. Does it make any difference?
Yeah, they obviously hated him. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, so that's a toxic situation. Like, and his play will suffer because of that.
Right.
But okay, now he's got a supportive front office, coaching staff, and you're seeing probably, the best of Goff at this point.
Right.
So.
Yeah, he's not going to get any better. That's a great point to make. He is what he is.
I mean, and he's not a bad quarterback. He is NFL caliber quarterback.
Right.
Is he starter material like Allen? I don't think so. I think that's where it kind of fell flat. I remember, Matt Stafford would get in there and grind away at the very end. He's an NFL starter.
He was a wonderful quarterback to watch the last 2 minutes of the game. He was, especially that season, might have been around 2017, 28. It was the year where I think he bailed them out like 8 games that year of come from behind wins. And the vast majority of them were like what we saw Allen do. Under a minute to go, and he was able to rally him down the field because he had that arm that allows you to put the ball in places most quarterbacks can't. Like Goff, he can't make those throws. And that's a wonderful thing to have in your back pocket.
Oh, totally. I remember his first year when he was, it was a terrible season for them, but he went in his rookie year. And I remember that game they played against Cleveland, and the last drive.
Shoulder.
Yeah, he just went in there and just rifled it in, and everybody's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And he had like one lame arm.
Yeah. His throwing arm at that. He's like, I have one throw left in me, and he made the throw.
So
and for all the grief Stafford got in Detroit, is he the best quarterback in football? No, but he's definitely a top 10 guy that you can win with. It's just that I think it's been proven that it was just incompetent management around him. Because there were times where Stafford was sniffing MVP in the MVP conversation until either injuries or stuff started to fall apart around him, and he was the best quarterback of our lives, to say the very. But then again, that's not a high bar to clear of the Lions. When your competition is Gary Danielson, but or Greg Landry or something like that. I want to go way back, to the Bill Munson leg. When you're two starting quarterbacks, your controversies between Bill Munson and Greg Landry, you don't have a quarterback. So it's how it's been. And at the very least, the Lions are now getting competent quarterbacking, but they're not getting elite quarterbacking. And it's pretty obvious for the most part in the NFL, you either win with an elite quarterback or someone that's really close to it, like an elite quarterback like Allen or Mahomes, or one that's close like Stafford, or you have the absolutely perfect. You have to have like one of the best like defenses ever. Like what the Broncos, their defense literally drugged Peyton Manning to that Super Bowl win. Peyton Manning was a shadow of his self at that point. Yet their defense was so dominant, they are able to win a Super Bowl despite Peyton Manning, because he was not he was not the quarterback he was even 3 years prior. He was done. He was toast. So Goff Goff might win you a playoff game, maybe. He's not going to win you a Super Bowl. And the question is will Bryce Stroud or Penix or any of these other guys do it? That's what Brad Holmes gets the big money for.
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of things that would have to happen. Let's say you go with Goff, you know what you've got.
Yeah.
You decide to draft a quarterback. Chances are, even the top quarterbacks are going to take their lumps. In their rookie season.
Yeah.
It's very few that just hit the ground running, and I'm struggling to even think of one. I mean, I think Peyton Manning, took a beating during his first couple seasons before he became Peyton Manning.
Even Patrick Mahomes is an outlier. Where he hits the ground running like he is. Josh Allen wasn't Josh Allen when he started in the league either. It took him a couple seasons.
So if you put in a new quarterback, you probably have 3 years of ramp up time, assuming you have a coaching staff that doesn't screw it up.
Yeah. That's the other thing. You have to have a coaching staff and a front office that won't get kneecapped and be fired before the end of that ramp up period. You're right.
That's right.
And that's another thing. Right now, I think in a lot of ways, Campbell and Holmes are still in the honeymoon period in a way. So now's the time. I
mean, Goff is in his big contract. I don't know how many years he's got left. He's got probably another
this year, $30 million per.
So you have him for a couple years. You have the first round pick from this year as a backup versus David Blau or whoever the hell they have now.
He's gone. I don't even know who the backup is at this. I can't. I'd have to look up his name. I know it's not Blau.
As I said it, I don't know either.
Yeah.
Like, who the heck is going to come in after?
I know, because they picked him up, right before the end of right before the season started. I'd have to bring up the roster and see who in the hell is the backup quarterback. I completely forgot, which says volumes about the quarterback situation in Detroit. That it's Goff or bust at this point.
I mean, basically is, right? It was Blau. Who was the other one? Boyle. And I thought they got rid of one.
Yeah, they brought
the other.
Yeah, Boyle is, I believe, on the practice squad right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where he should be.
Yeah.
And
Nate Sudfeld. Nate Sudfeld is the backup.
I think I remember hearing that name.
Sudfeld.
Yeah, I have no idea. Who is it?
He is a 29-year-old quarterback who played college ball at Indiana.
Okay.
And let me bring up his stats for Nate Sudfeld. He has played in 4 games in his career and has completed 25 passes in those 4 games. And he spent 2 years with Philadelphia. I think he bounced around the league on practice squads. So that is not the developmental quarterback that people keep talking about. Again, essentially, Boyle and Sudfeld are placeholders for backups, and then Goff essentially is a placeholder for the next starter. Yeah, the quarterback room in Detroit is kind of a mess. It really is. There is no legitimate backup right now. If Goff goes down, the season is over. There's literally I wouldn't trust either one of those, Sudfeld or Boyle. Not either one of them. I've never even seen Sudfeld play. I'll be honest. I probably saw him play at Indiana. Didn't realize it. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, and look at how much we struggle to remember his name, even.
Yeah, exactly. Or Nate Sudafed or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So, which surprises me. I don't think Holmes has done that bad in drafting.
No, he's done pretty darn well.
But I don't know what the hell they're thinking with place kicker and with backup quarterback.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a backup quarterback, you're really hosed.
Yeah.
It could get ugly.
It would,
for the Lions, it could get ugly really fast.
Yeah, you're right about that. Correct. And I'm with you, especially on the kick. We've been spoiled in Detroit. There's been elite level kicking with the Lions since the late 70s with Eddie Murray to Jason Hansen, then to Matt Prater. We've been spoiled with always, 50 yards, no problem. They, have a great kicker. Then all of a sudden, these last couple years, where once they decided we're not going to pay Prater $6 million a year, and it's been roulette essentially trying to find a kicker. Just draft one. Go with who's the Michigan's Nails kicker? The Lou Groza Award winner. Get him in the draft. What's that?
Moody.
Moody. Jake Moody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been hearing that.
Just draft him in like the 6th round and say, here, you're our kicker for the next 10 years.
Or you could do what the Raiders did. I think they drafted a kicker in the first
Sebastian
round.
Sebastian Janikowski.
He's in the Hall of Fame now, isn't he?
I couldn't tell you, but the guy had a leg and a half. But I can understand drafting a kicker. Just do it like in the 6th or 7th round. Usually those higher draft pick when guys get picked like early. I think like the kid out of Georgia a few years ago got picked, I think by Tampa Bay, if I remember right. And he washed out with them after a season or two. I mean, it's two different animals kicking in the NFL compared to college ball. But, some guys, I'm sold on Moody. I mean, that guy has, been. You could make an argument that Michigan's MVP is obviously Blake Corum. And then probably number 2 would be their offensive line, and number 3 would be Jake Moody, because Moody has literally won a couple games for them with his legs, specifically the Illinois game. I mean, if he doesn't come through with some of those kicks in a swirling wind, we're probably not talking about in a couple minutes Michigan being a national title contender. So,
well, I will say even in the Michigan State game, I think he kicked a bunch of field goals. So Michigan wasn't scoring that much touchdowns.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. They had those red zone issues during the middle of the season where they couldn't punch the ball in, and Moody was bailing them out.
And on the flip side, just kind of going on an aside, during that Michigan State game, the announcer said that Michigan State had only attempted like one field goal up until that game. And I'm like, really?
Yeah. The difference between having a field goal kicker you can trust and when you don't. Exactly.
And when you can't, then your only option to score is either a safety, a pick six, or a touchdown.
Yeah.
I mean, but your margin of victory only has to be 1 point. And a lot of them, they are 1 point games, 1 to 3 points.
Exactly. Well, actually, this sounds like a good time to segue into the Wolverines, as we really should talk about them, especially you being an alum and me just being a big fan. I got to be honest, I was actually pacing during the Illinois game at the end, which I hardly ever do. Because especially that final drive, I'm like, holy, that was a nerve-wracking finish to the Illinois game. But I wasn't sure what I was expecting this past Saturday with the Buckeyes, but I wasn't expecting a curb stomping, and that's essentially what we got in the second half. Essentially, for the second year in a row in the second half, the Wolverines absolutely just took it to the Buckeyes. They won 45-23 going away. I mean, it was still like a one-score game going into the fourth quarter, and they just walked away from them. And that was their second straight win in the rivalry. Essentially, 3 years after, about 2.5 years after Ryan Day said we're going to hang 100 on Michigan. He's halfway there 2 seasons later. So I believe they've scored 22 and 23 points the last 2 years. And essentially, newly named Big Ten Coach of the Year, Jim Harbaugh, a man who was almost run out of town after the COVID season. He has Michigan at 12-0. They were now the second-ranked team in the AP poll, and it was just released. They are now number 2 in the college playoff poll. They're going to face the 8-4 Boilermakers, or as people like to call them, the Spoilermakers, in the Big Ten championship game this Saturday. Essentially, though, this win over the Buckeyes, which was impressive as hell. That second half was much like we talked about on the last show. Watching them just all of a sudden just decide we're going to that long third quarter drive, we decided, we're just going to grind it out. And it was like a 15-play, 8-minute drive, which ended in that J.D. McCarthy running it into the end zone from 3 yards out on third down. That's the kind of stuff I love to see from Michigan. And that's, that was the Michigan realized we are tougher, we are stronger, we are meaner, and these guys are going to give up. And that's exactly what happened after that drive. The game was essentially over. So now you got Michigan in a spot where they are well placed to make a run in the playoffs. And, Harbaugh is now, essentially it's just amazing to see where he was 3 years ago to where he is today. And then you look at Ohio State, their fan base is almost in complete meltdown mode, comparing Ryan Day to John Cooper, who was 2-9-1 against Michigan. Now Ryan Day is now 1-2. So I gotta say, it was just a glorious game to watch. Michigan hung in unexpectedly in the first half by hitting long passes they missed all year long. For the most part, all of a sudden, it's like McCarthy suddenly realized, I need to underthrow the ball a few yards rather than overthrow the ball by 5. All of a sudden, and he hits 3 long passes. So, it was just a wonderful thing to watch. And then at the end of the game, when they break out the running game and just say, we're going to run the ball, you can't stop us, and they couldn't. And Donovan Edwards just went ham, with two, a 75 and an 85-yard run. Oh my God, it was just glorious to watch. And more than anything, what's even better is just watching Ohio State fans just lose it. Because we were talking before the show, and they've been spoiled for 20 years. They're to the point where, they not only expect a win over Michigan, they demand a win over Michigan. And all of a sudden, it's obvious that the best coach on the field that day, but actually the last 2 years, was Jim Harbaugh. It's obvious he completely outcoached Ryan Day.
Yeah, he's done a hell of a job the last 2 years coaching. And they hired him because he's a good coach. He's always been a good coach, no matter where he's been.
And he's always turned around teams.
Exactly. It took a little time with Michigan. And
I think longer than most people thought. Longer than I thought it would.
Yeah, same here. I mean, he got in players, but I think in some of his, during his original contract, let me call it that, when he was in that sort of phase, he got to be a little bit too much of a caricature for some reason. And there were always, you always hear news about him doing all these antics.
Exactly. The shenanigans on the sidelines have been way toned down.
Yeah, and my guess is when he got this second contract and it wasn't as lucrative as his first, is probably Emmanuel was saying to him, okay, no more fucking around.
It was full of incentives, and he can make similar money, but he had to earn it this time around, which apparently he is.
He's done a damn good job. Well, the clever thing, I think, was he started this last year is. Let's not be like everybody else and have these spread offenses and just pass and pass and pass. Let's have a running game, an old school running game.
Yeah, he is zigging when everybody else is zagging. And that's the thing. You look at Ohio State. That's Ohio State. Ohio State wants to throw the ball around. Woody Hayes would be rolling in his grave right now watching Ryan Day's offense, and Harbaugh's like, we're just going to out, call it man ball, call it bully ball. That's he's just gonna essentially punch you in the face and dare you to slug back. And we're finding out most teams, the way they're built today, can't punch back.
Right, they're built for the pass. They're built for that. I don't know if they're
built
spread offense,
on both sides of the ball for the pass.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So nobody's prepared to stop the run. So and it's really clever.
Yeah.
One of the things I was thinking about before the game was that he. Most of the Michigan games this year have been run, Corum, run.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll get a rushing touchdown, or you're going to get a lot of field goals.
Right.
So you have a good kicker. So get your points. And Michigan won that way.
Yeah.
So they just wear a team down by running. Your top running back goes down. You still have Edwards, but he was kind of hurt, at least from the reports I was reading.
Yeah.
And Corum was basically out. So did Michigan
Edwards was playing of essentially one hand. He had there was some sort of thumb issue where he was almost wearing a club on one hand.
Okay.
Yet he was still able to run for 200 yards, which was shocking.
Right. And the thinking was, oh my God, Michigan, their offense was out. Like,
Yeah,
who
those
do
two
they
guys.
have?
Yeah, exactly. That was their offense.
And I think basically Ohio State was preparing for the run because that's what Michigan has shown all year long.
Yeah.
And honestly, McCarthy didn't pass that well during the season. He
just couldn't hit the long ball. He had halfway decent completion percentages, but it was all under 15, 20, probably under 15 yards. And whenever he threw the long ball, it was always inaccurate for some reason. As I mentioned, it was usually overthrown. He could also add, Michigan's receivers weren't getting a lot of separation. And all of a sudden in this game, however they game planned it, they had guys running 15 yards open. It was amazing to see.
It was shocking, actually.
Yeah.
And I was wondering whether Harbaugh would, just stick with a run, but now have somebody else in there and not Corum, or whether he was going to try something different. And thank God he actually said, okay, we're going to have a different game plan. We're not just going to do the obvious thing.
The sign of a good coach.
Exactly. Make the adjustments. It's funny.
And then he pulled a couple plays out there, like the jump pass from the running back. It went for a clutch first down.
Oh yeah, that was kind of weird when you first see that. It's like, what? What just happened?
Why is the fourth string running back even in the game? And then after the game it came out, well, he's the only guy who could throw the ball because Edwards has the busted hand and Corum's hurt. And he in practice he proved he could do it. So they brought him in. Essentially, they brought him in early in the first half, and he got stuffed on 3rd and 1, essentially setting it up for the play in the second half, where they ran the same exact play, except for this time he stopped and threw the ball to a wide open Loveland, the tight end, and it was like that is Jim Harbaugh completely flummoxing Ryan Day right there.
Oh, totally. I mean, Harbaugh and his staff prepared a hell of a game.
Yeah.
You can't deny it. It's funny. I had a friend of mine text me. During the first half, he said, I hope Michigan can make adjustments, in the second half.
They always do.
I'm going, hang on, wait for the second half.
Yep.
Like, I would not read anything into the first half.
Yeah.
If they kept it close to the first half, which they did in the end.
Yep.
That's kind of a back and
That's essentially been the MO all season. Close first half, grind them in the dust in the second half. This game was no different.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just it was kept close by a slightly different game plan, by throwing the ball a little bit more.
Yeah, and I mean, he called a hell of a game. Let's see. I hope they don't get cocky and overconfident for the next game. But I said that last year, and I'll say it again. You can't get too cocky with any of these teams. Never mind what their record was. Never mind that Purdue was 8-4, lost 4 games. So what?
Yeah.
And
honestly, I kind of got that feeling with the Illinois game that they took him a little bit lightly. Harbaugh, essentially, if they even had a bruise, he didn't play guys for the most part. And look what happened. Michigan had to ball out in the fourth quarter to pull the game out in the last minute. I don't think that's going to happen against the Boilermakers, but the scary part is Purdue has a history of knocking off highly rated teams in important games. I mean, I've seen them do it to Michigan State. I saw them do it to Ohio State. It happens. So, but I would not be surprised either to see Michigan do to Purdue what they did to Iowa in the championship game last year, and that game was over in the second quarter. So,
yeah, I mean, if they're if they're getting ready to play, then they should.
Yeah.
If they get too cocky.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Then after this game, they got 6 weeks off. Because they're in the playoff. I mean, as I said, the rankings just came out. It's Georgia, Michigan, TCU, USC, and guess who's number 5? Ohio State.
Ohio State.
They didn't fall that far, and they're ahead of Alabama, who's number 6. So if TCU or USC loses, Ohio State could sneak back into the playoff picture. I'm curious to see what would happen. there's still a lot of gears in motion here because could Alabama? Alabama's in the SEC title game against LSU. What if Alabama dominates LSU? They could vault over Ohio State because Ohio State season's done. They can't put anything else in front of the committee because they have no more games to play. The teams who have championship games actually have it's an advantage because they can have a chance to add one more game to the resume. Like I don't see TCU or USC losing, but I don't want to see Ohio State or Alabama again. I want fresh blood. We already got Georgia. Michigan has finally crashed the party. Let's get some fresh teams into the playoff picture. I don't want to see Ohio State and Alabama again. Thank God Clemson lost to South Carolina. I don't want to watch them either.
Oh, that makes two of us.
Yeah.
I don't even want to see LSU in there either.
No,
they always
exactly.
Too.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, my goodness. But, yeah, it was and we're speaking of watching the games. The ratings came out, or at least Fox announced for their coverage. And there's reason why when people like, why did the Big Ten get so much money in the latest rights fees? Because they signed that new contract. We're earning $8 billion over 7 years from CBS, Fox, and NBC. Well, Fox Sports announced on Sunday that the Michigan-Ohio State game averaged 17 million people watching. They had a peak of 20 million people watching. And that's at noon. That's not in prime time. And it's the most watched regular season college football game since 2011 and the most watched college football game ever on Fox Sports. So, it's ridiculous how valuable how live sports is. And it really drives home why there's going to be the Power 5 is now going to be the Power 2 very, very soon when these new contracts kick in between the SEC and the Big Ten. But it also goes to show that just how valuable some of these brands are. And say what you will about the University of Michigan and Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia being impressive schools. It's higher learning. They're massive research institutions and things like that. But they are also highly valuable brands, and this just goes to show that teams like Michigan and Ohio State literally print money for themselves and for the TV people and the media people. And it's, I wonder what the ratings would have been if they had played that game at 8 o'clock at night. Not that game would ever happen at 8 o'clock at night, because neither team would want that, because that's one of the few rivalries I think that will never change. That game will always be played at noon, even though it's no longer being played before Thanksgiving. Now it's after Thanksgiving. But it's just ridiculous just how popular these teams are. I mean, Michigan is literally one of the most valuable sports brands in the world.
Yeah, well, that's also why I don't know if you've kept track of this. Why Ohio State trademarked the word "the," which normally I've done trademark work, and normally you can't trademark the word "the."
Yeah.
But they were able to get this narrow trademark granted.
Yeah.
For certain types of merchandise and so on and so forth. But it's because that brand of Ohio State football is so damn valuable.
Yeah.
And you can even see, in addition to that, you can see with all these like conference shifts with teams changing conferences.
Yeah, USC and UCLA coming in 2 years.
It's kind of retarded from the sense of now the Big Ten is no longer this Midwest conference. It goes all the way from
coast to coast,
Piscataway, New Jersey, all the way to South Central LA.
Yeah.
And but it makes total sense to bring in other good teams with brands, basically.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's I'm still waiting for there's going to be more shoes to drop. There has to be. I'm still stunned that Notre Dame is still holding out as an independent. Because the SEC or the Big Ten would snap them up in a heartbeat. and they would be a perfect fit for the Big Ten, in Indiana, in Big Ten territory, with built-in rivalries, especially if USC coming into the Big Ten. I mean, they would have immediate rivalries with USC, Michigan State, Michigan, and then obviously Purdue, and then again, and there's always Ohio State. I mean, Notre Dame and they're wanting to cling to independence. It's so cute, but you have to wonder how long it's going to last because of they are just not going to. I mean, as again, they're another huge brand, but they can't generate the same amount of money that Ohio State and Michigan and Georgia and Alabama and Auburn and Michigan State and blah, blah, blah can generate because they are part of the Big Two and going to be on these massive, massive TV deals. I mean, yeah, it's nice that Notre Dame is nice that they get to keep all their money. They don't have to share it with 15 other teams, but it's still a smaller slice than Northwestern gets. And 1 in 11 Northwestern is making more money on TV than Notre Dame. I mean, and sooner that's going to start catching up to these other schools.
Yeah, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Notre Dame is in a conference except for football.
ACC,
yeah.
ACC.
And so basketball and whatever. Yeah, I think they play hockey too. They have pretty good hockey teams.
Actually, in hockey, they're in the Big Ten.
Okay. Oh, really?
Yeah.
So they're kind of like divided up
all over the place. Yeah, wherever they can get their sports in, that's where they go. So essentially, basketball and most of the Olympic sports are the ACC. Hockey is the Big Ten, and then obviously football, they're independent. But
interesting.
That's a lot. One, that's a lot to manage, and two, it seems like there's power in numbers. And if they joined the Big Ten, if I was a Pollyanna, I wish it was back it was in the 70s, where you had all these different conferences and they would play big interconference games. There weren't so many cupcakes. And then at the end of the year, everybody went to their bowl games and then the media just said, okay, you're number one. That ship has sailed. As cute as it was, as innocent, I guess you could say, as it was, and there was not nearly as much money involved. That we're not going to see that anymore. Right now, it's literally with college sports. It's kill or be killed. It's all about how much money you can generate, and it's pretty obvious now that the SEC and the Big Ten have pretty much mastered making money and how to do it. And it also does help that, especially the Big Ten. The Big Ten has all the big markets. On the East Coast, they got New York with Rutgers. You can put that in quotes, but they are on TV and they're out there. But you got Chicago, you got Detroit, you got Minneapolis. You have obviously now you have LA. You have some massive markets. Chicago, how forget Chicago? Number 2 in the country. So. The Big Ten is just, is just set up for the next decade just to rake in money. It's just going to be a huge shakeup on how we see college sports. Like, as someone who loves watching college football, because I became a college fan because Michigan was the only good team in Detroit for most of the 70s. Right? So obviously, who else am I going to watch? I grew to love them. And, it's, we're at a point now where there's probably going to be about 48 teams maybe, that are going to be able to rake in all the cash. And then you're going to have the Washington States and the Kansas States and the Arizonas of the world essentially becoming a glorified group, essentially that tier between the Power 2 and the Group of 5. And see, that's where you see the Big 12 right now, trying to get everybody they can into that conference, trying to fill in that gap and be a third big conference, even though it's going to be all small markets. But there are going to be teams left out in the cold. I mean, look what's going to happen to like the Boise States of the world. There was a time where they were must-watch television there for a while. And they're in the Mountain West, and most of their games now are played at like 10 o'clock at night on ESPNU. That kind of thing. So it's, I'm just, as a fan of someone who grew up watching Big Ten football, grew up watching Big Ten sports, I'm very lucky that the team I root for is safe. I guess that's the best way to put it. After I've done rambling here, the team I root for is going to be safe when this all ultimately shakes out. Michigan is always going to have a spot at the big boys table. But I feel awful for fans of teams like, I said Oklahoma State or Baylor or Boston College. They're kind of going to be lost in the wilderness when this all shakes out. And that's kind of a shame, because that's part of what makes college sports so cool, is the fact that you do have you do have some schools that have a long history of playing some fairly high level sports that are going to be left out in the cold.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody, and he was lamenting that the Longhorns in Texas and the Aggies don't play each other anymore.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
One of them switched conferences.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it looks like Nebraska doesn't play Colorado anymore, or Nebraska doesn't play Oklahoma.
Right.
Yeah.
So in addition to going to Michigan, I did my graduate work at Iowa State University. So I remember
and there's a team that's going to be left out in the cold.
They will. I mean, they've never been that good.
Yeah.
The university bookstore used to have a shirt that says "A drinking school with a football problem," and which, coming from Michigan, I started at Michigan first and finished there. Then there was nothing to root for at Iowa State as far as football goes. But that Big 12 is falling apart. You used to have Oklahoma State. You would have Nebraska when they used to be good.
Yeah.
In the 90s. They would have, they would be slugging it out.
With in the last years, the Big 12 will have lost Oklahoma, Texas, and Nebraska. I mean, essentially, their three biggest brands.
Exactly, and Colorado stinks right now.
Yeah,
I think that was the other big one from the 90s.
that was the other one that was in the Big 12. They went to the Pac.
Oh, did they moved out too?
Yeah, they're out.
I can't keep track of this.
Yeah,
I have a feeling in the end, when all the dust settles, it'll be Big 10 versus SEC for a championship, and then there's some other satellite conference.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll do it like they do European soccer. If you're
relegation,
if you're not that good, you put you in the second league until you kind of punch above your weight.
I think that is an awesome way to do it. It'll never happen in the States, but that is an awesome. Because just seeing the emotion of teams that are like fighting for last place, and those games are so intense just to be able to stay in the Premier League and not fall down to the football league, I believe they call it, the second tier.
Yeah.
And those games get intense to avoid relegation. It never happened in here. Just that's why European soccer team owners don't like that either. That's why there was that talk of that Super League a year ago that the fans rebelled against. Or where the top 16 teams wanted to have their own league. Combining like Premier League and Serie A and the Bundesliga. So if I'm pronouncing that right, listen to me talking like a soccer expert. Just because I watched most of the World Cup game today. Yeah, go USA. Oh, yeah. So, which was actually that game got really intense at the end. I'm not the hugest soccer fan in the world. I will watch World Cup games just because, again, it's the emotion involved, just because they're so big. Like the Olympics.
Yep.
But watching the end of USA Iran doesn't get more intense than that. It was really, really, because the U.S. was struggling to hold on to a 1-goal lead, and the winner, essentially, this was a winner-take-all game. Whoever lost was out of the World Cup. And just watching how desperate Iran got at the end, and the emotions involved, I can, it's obvious why this is such a big deal around the world. And when a old man like me, who never grew up playing soccer, never grew up playing, watching soccer, gets caught up in it, that says volumes about the sport.
Yeah, I wish I was getting more hooked into it. I do pay attention a little bit, at least to the standings and who won what, but I haven't watched the games because of the time change. Because I'm
and the games are
10
on
hours
times.
different.
I mean, the early games go on start in the middle of the night your time.
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird time when it's a 10-hour time difference, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, for you.
And,
exactly.
So I never get a chance to look at that.
But but that, again, as we're talking about television, I guess there's one other thing we need to mention about this. This kind of snuck under the radar. I don't know if a lot of people caught this, but in basketball, the Big Ten ACC Challenge has been a thing for like a decade or something like that. Well, this is the last year of it, due to ESPN losing the TV rights to the Big Ten. So rather than come to some sort of joint agreement or working something out between all the networks, ESPN's like, whatever, which means there's now going to be an SEC ACC challenge instead, which is kind of a shame, but some of those, that way, it was nice, you had some great matchups. You'd see Michigan play Duke or Michigan State play North Carolina, stuff like that. And that's going away again because of the TV money, because all the Big Ten games are going to be, I think for the most part, on Fox Sports 1 and Peacock, which is going to be a big change. That especially basketball, because the weeknight games are going to be for the most part on FS1 and the Big Ten network. Obviously, any overflow they're going to be stuck on streaming on Peacock because they're not going to be shown on CBS or Fox proper during the week. Those games are going to be kind of shuffled off into the higher numbers of the cable dial, so to speak. So again, but then again, just goes to show it's all about football money. That the Big Ten isn't all that worried about the basketball teams kind of being shuffled off to the sideline and not getting the big coverage on ESPN because they're getting the football money.
Yeah, and the big money in the basketball
and the tournament
during the tournament.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's where.
And be honest, I think most people who watch college basketball. I mean, I've seen I only think I've sat through one full Michigan game. I've seen a half here, a half there, but I find it hard to get riled up about college basketball when college football is going on. And I probably won't start paying that much attention, as you said, probably until it starts ramping up in the tournament, close the tournament. Then you have the conference tournaments and then the NCAA tournament, and that's when everybody's interest just skyrockets because, and again, when it comes to basketball, I just find myself more of a pro fan because of the level of play. College basketball, again, I think with college basketball, it's more about the emotions of the game than the actual skill set you're going to see compared to the NBA, where just the skills are out of this world. I got the Piston game on in the background as they are getting their asses handed to them again. 70-56 right now. So, but still, it's still a shame that basketball is kind of being shuffled off to the side a little bit. Meanwhile, the football teams are going to be on over-the-air television every Saturday, on either CBS, NBC, or Fox, which is, I think, very, very smart of the Big Ten. You won't need cable to watch the biggest games of the year in an era where people are cutting the cord for their cable. So it was a very, very smart thing for the football side of things, but I think it is going to hurt them on the basketball side, as we're seeing by the Big Ten ACC Challenge going bye-bye.
Yeah, they're very different sports too. I think I agree with you. I don't get hooked into the basketball as much until actually tournament time even.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are some diehards that love the regular season and all that, but I haven't gotten hooked into that. Whereas football, I think I watch the regular season more, and then unless maybe Michigan is in the championship or in a bowl game, I don't give a crap about the bowl season. Yeah,
for the most part. Yeah, I'll put the games on because maybe there's nothing else on, but don't have a vested rooting interest in like the Pool and Weed Eater, Ohio. I mean, the Idaho Potato, whatever bowl. So,
yeah, exactly. They're meaningless. The championships, I'll tune in because they're really playing for something.
Yeah. I've even kind of lost interest in even the Rose Bowl, unless it's a semifinal, for the playoff. The Rose Bowl has essentially been rendered meaningless for the most part because it's no longer the best of the Big Ten versus the best of the West Coast. Best of the Pac-12. It's whoever they can get. And that ship sailed years ago when, was it? You had when Texas played in the damn Rose Bowl. That's when you knew things were changing. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, the old school, the prestige of the Rose Bowl is just a faded memory at this point.
Yeah,
which
if
I'm
that's going to
fine
be the
with
last
it. Michigan
bowl
lost
that's
too
going to
many
try
of
and
those.
cling on to the traditions that are sailing away very, very quickly. Because they I guess that's a big issue right now with expanding the playoffs, is that the Rose Bowl is refusing to give up the 5 p.m. New Year's Day, 5 p.m. Eastern Time New Year's Day kickoff, and that's not what the powers that be want a playoff game to kick off at. They want to kick off at 8:00 at night.
Prime time.
So it's very possible they could. I've saw today. It's very possible that if the Rose Bowl committee doesn't agree to these changes, they could be left out of the playoff rotation altogether, which would then again accelerate the fall of the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, it's right now things are changing enough. If you stick with tradition, you will be left out in the dark, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, versus changing with the times and trying to get your sort of reinvent yourself, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's no more the days of Big Ten versus Pac-10 and the Rose Bowl. You have the parade and all this other, hoopla that would go with it.
Mm-hmm.
And the prestige is more of a memory. That's historical.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because I mean, when I was growing up, it wasn't about winning the national title. It was about winning the Rose Bowl.
Exactly.
It was about it wasn't it was you win the Big Ten, you win the Rose Bowl, everything else it falls as it may. That's Bo Schembechler, Woody Hayes. It was all about the Rose Bowl, and it's not like that anymore. And now, like I said, now there's talk that, for example, C.J. Stroud is not going to play in if Ohio State ends up in the Rose Bowl, which is very, very possible. He's not going to play because he does. Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, it makes perfect sense. I would never hold it against the player. And I think the last, when I saw what happened to Jake Butt for Michigan in the Orange Bowl, where he was going to be probably a second round draft pick, and he had his knee exploded in that game, and he was never the same player, and his NFL career never really got off the ground because of it. That right there is that is why players won't play in a meaningless bowl game. They will play in the playoff. That is it. I mean, that's what makes the most sense to me, which is this kind of accelerates the decline of the bowls. Why watch a bowl game when the best players, for perfectly logical financial reasons, aren't going to play in those games?
That's right. I mean, there's no incentive for them. It's like playing in the Pro Bowl in the NFL.
Yeah. That's a very apt comparison.
Like, why, for such a violent sport where injury is very likely, would you waste time on something as utterly meaningless? I would rather, honestly, I thought about this. I think they should replace the Pro Bowl and get the best players and have a paper football contest. There's no injuries unless you do something really dumb. Yeah. It's probably a lot more fun.
Yeah, exhibition games. They're postseason exhibition games, and it really all they do. And when you watch the bowl games, there's hardly anybody in the stands unless it's like one of the New Year's Six or the playoff games. But yeah, like we have a bowl game in Detroit. There's probably maybe 10,000 people in the stands, if that, and it's pretty much 5,000 from a MAC team and 5,000 from whatever team they were able to drag in there. And it's all about television, because these bowl games essentially give ESPN something to show almost every day of the week in the month of December. And people and I admit I will often just turn these games on because there's nothing else on to watch, and so here we are. I'm part of the problem because I'll turn these bowl games on even though they don't really mean much. But again, they're essentially they put them in their background noise. But it's content for ESPN, an entity that desperately needs content every night of the week, which explains why the MAC plays games on Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Yeah, I guess they don't have enough dog shows they can show.
Yeah, yeah, because Greg and I have talked to Chris Creighton of Eastern Michigan a few times, and I even asked him about that. Now, is it hard to play on a Tuesday night when it's 30 degrees outside and there's 5,000 people in the stands?
Mm-hmm.
And he says we do it for the money, for the TV,
Mm-hmm.
Because that money keeps the program alive. And if that means they have to, play at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday in November when there's nobody in the stands, that's what they're going to do. And the same goes for, like, you see the Sun Belt does the same thing and a few other conferences. But again, it's all about content for the giant machine that is ESPN and Fox and the other networks. So
Right.
Yeah. All right. With that rant out of the way, we should touch a little bit on Tunnelgate because it's kind of come to an end. We talked about it on the last show.
Right.
And I believe yesterday, the Big Ten Conference announced they will fine MSU $100,000. Mm-hmm. And MSU cornerback, Kerry Klump, he's the helmet swinger. He was suspended for essentially 12 games, the 4 games he missed this year, and then the first 8 of the 2023 season. Right. Also, Crump was arraigned today as the Washtenaw County prosecutor has charged him with felony assault with a dangerous weapon. Mm-hmm. You hit someone with a hard plastic helmet, that's a felony. Duh. Mm-hmm. The other players involved were charged with misdemeanor aggravated assault. Essentially, they're going to get tickets or fines and community service or something like that. And the other kid, he'll probably end up on probation as well. Regardless of all that, there was a felony committed, according to the prosecutor. Mm-hmm. And then U of M received a reprimand because a fan slapped Mel Tucker on the top of his head after the game. Which was funny because Tom Izzo got all uppity about this. Tom Izzo did Tom Izzo stuff by saying, "I'm completely upset with it. I think to get $100,000 fine, a suspension of a player is fine, but to get a fine like that and the other school gets reprimanded, what the hell does reprimanded mean?" I don't think Tom Izzo realized what Michigan State got reprimanded for. Michigan didn't get reprimanded at all for what happened in the tunnel. They just got reprimanded because they had a fan do something stupid, and then that fan got banned for life from the stadium anyway. So I know that's the media asking Izzo's opinion on this, but why? What does Izzo's opinion mean about about any of this stuff? He wasn't there. When did Tom Izzo become the spokesman for all things Michigan State sports? I know that's essentially what he is now. He probably has, I didn't say probably, he does have more power there than the athletic director or the president, for that matter. So, of course, he's going to inject his opinions on this, but his opinion really meant nothing on this. If anything, it just adds more fuel to the fire, which is stupid.
Honestly, it looks like I was wondering about that too. To me, it was just a much ado about nothing on his part.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, we talked about it last time. The law enforcement got involved. They did their job.
Yep.
The information got sent to prosecutors. We knew something was going to happen, and it did.
Yep.
So,
and the Big
Ten waited until all that's done.
Right.
And they responded. I thought the reprimand was more to Michigan.
I didn't realize we got to do something to the other side.
Maybe I thought it was for Michigan not managing that tunnel situation.
No, it was literally for the head. It was literally for that kid who tapped Mel Tucker on the head. That's why they got reprimanded. Apparently, because they didn't control the field enough or something.
Yeah, it was something of that sort. I think that was the wording I heard. It was like controlling the field. I thought it was controlling the tunnel, but
no, it was what happened on the field. So Izzo kind of got the facts wrong.
So, yeah, I don't know. I hate to put too much put too much energy into it.
The door should be
just
shut.
Shut up.
You're not bringing anything new to this at all. You're
not solving any kind of problem. You're just kind of kicking up dirt. It's much ado about nothing. Everybody who should be responsible for doing something did something, and I think they handled it well. I think Tucker handled it well. I think Harbaugh gets a little goofy, maybe the way he words things, but he might have gotten a little excessive in the way or harsh. But at the same time, he's protecting his players then, too. But even with him, I don't object to anything he said. Everybody tried to work together on it.
Yeah, and Mel Tucker the same. Mel Tucker, I think, handled this perfectly, best he could.
Do you think we should send over Juwan Howard to slap Izzo? If he gets out of line again, like
yeah.
I figure he's got one more slap in there before they throw him out of there. But
all right, but I'm just the door is shut on this. Izzo, as you said, decided to stir up a little shit with his comments when he could have just said, "I'm here to talk basketball." He
should have.
Yeah, but that's Tom
agree.
Izzo being Tom Izzo at this point. He's bigger than the school. Then again, you can make the argument Jim Harbaugh is on his way to becoming bigger than the school as well, and that kind of goes with the territory with big-time college sports, where the highest paid person in the damn state government is the football or basketball coach, which says a lot about our country and none of it good. But regardless of that, all right. As we're starting to hit the home stretch of the show, when we last talked, we talked a little Tigers. Essentially, we talked about what the Tigers, what the Tigers are going to do when it came to the non-tender deadline. Who were they going to move on from? Who were they going to protect? And that announcement came this past week or so, I believe, and several longtime team roster members are no longer Tigers. As Victor Reyes had already been announced when we last talked. But since then, the Tigers declined to offer 2023 contracts to pitchers Miguel Diaz and Kyle Funkhouser. And Funkhouser was injured. So, and there's rumors that it might be a career ender or very, very serious. Catcher Michael Papierski, I think he's a AAA depth guy. Infielder Brendan Davis, another AAA depth guy. And the most relevant to Tigers fans were utility players Hitton Harold Castro and Willie Castro were non-tendered, along with longtime starting third baseman Jeimer Candelario. He was also non-tendered. There was talk that Candelario, the Tigers would have not minded him returning. They just did not want to pay the $7 million plus it would take in arbitration to keep him. They would have kept him at a cheaper price. And Candelario, who really did have an awful year, he hit 217, a 633 OPS, and a K rate. He doesn't walk and he strikes out too much. His K rate at almost 25%. And Candelario said, well, I'm just going to move on. And that happened today as he signed the two-time Tiger of the Year, which is says volumes about the Tigers that he's your Tiger of the Year. It was 2 years running that he inked a 1 year, $5 million deal with the Nationals. So that's a huge gaping hole at third base. Regardless of what you think of Candelario, he was at least for a season and a half, he played legitimate big league third base in 2020 and 2021. He fell off a cliff this past year, and you have to replace him now. That's honestly, I'm wondering what the Tigers are going to do, because in free agency, you're probably going to overpay for someone like Brandon Drury, or you're going to have to ride with a prospect like Colt Keith or Ryan Kreidler, and those two probably aren't ready, or in Kreidler's case, probably better used in the Castro role of a utility player. So I think this is Scott Harris's first big, I wouldn't say crisis. This is his first big major decision that he needs to make. How do you plug a giant hole at third base?
I would expand that to say, how do you plug all the other giant holes that they have? Because I think the only thing I've seen like two things in like reading and hearing about the Tigers lately. Number one is front office hires.
Right.
Which, okay, so far they sound promising. The next thing I've heard is letting go a lot of the Tigers regulars, the players.
Right.
Candelario is probably the biggest name of all. Who's going to be their catcher? Who's going to be on first? Is it going to be Torkelson? Is it going to be somebody else?
He's on second. At least short-term. I'm just saying. I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry.
Oh, I know. I was trying to weave that in there myself. So I was trying to weave something like that in there. I couldn't do it. And,
but yeah, exactly. I think right now, those are the two most gaping holes: is catcher and third base. Essentially, 2/6 of your 2/5 of your infield.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's a lot to fill in one offseason. I mean, and there's no way they can go into this season, thinking Jake Rogers and Eric Haas are going to be your catching duo. I mean, that's a big ask from Haas, who again probably better used as a utility player, and Rogers, who still hasn't proven he can hit and is coming off of Tommy John. So, yeah, this is it's kind of concerning right now. Obviously, it's too early to get panicky or or started getting upset at Harris because they hadn't even had the winter meetings yet, and free agent signings are just now starting to trickle out there. And a lot of this stuff really doesn't even get going until the winter meetings, which I think in a week or two. But yeah, this is like he's got his work cut out for him all of a sudden. He has let go, essentially his entire his bench. his bench for one in the Castros, because the Castros are essentially the bench, and obviously he doesn't have anybody. He doesn't have a full-time catcher or a full-time third baseman. So yeah, there's some big ass holes to fill there. Yeah, you make a good point that I'm harping on third base, but yeah, there's gaps in this roster all over the place.
That's right. And so the question is, how is he going to, number one, baseball season and the postseason lasted so damn long. So that he couldn't act, I think, during those times to acquire players, right?
Yeah.
While that's still going on. Then now he's getting rid of all the certain players, not tendering them, not going to arbitration with others.
Right.
Some of them you scratch your head and like, why is he keeping so-and-so? And like, why are you keeping Greg Soto? He was a nightmare. Probably because he pitches 100 miles an hour.
And he's a lefty to boot. Yeah. A 100-mile-an-hour throwing left-hander, there's value there. Even if
you at least try something with it.
Exactly.
Right? But the thing he hasn't really done much yet is acquire any players. So everybody's wondering, like, how are you going to solve all these problems? Because you need a third baseman.
Yeah.
And God, I hope he's not going to just populate it all with minor leaguers.
No. I mean, a guy like Colt Keefe could pan out, but he's not ready this year. He won't be ready this year at all. And Kreider, Kreidler, he's still a question mark. He was not really thought as that much of a prospect to the last couple of years himself. And then again, he had a down year last year because of injury. So yeah, you can't throw those guys in there like that. Yeah, it's going to have to come from it's going to have to come from out of the organization, also being creative. Maybe you move Scope from second to third and find a second baseman. Or do the same thing of Baez, even though they've said he's our shortstop. You find a shortstop, which is good. Honestly, if you look at free agency, that's a lot easier to find a shortstop than it is a third baseman right now. And then you move Baez or whoever you find and put them at third. But there are options, so it's going to require some creativity. And that's something, I guess, that we're all leery about because we saw very little creativity from the Alavila era of baseball around here.
I think we could have done just as well with a dartboard that Avila did. It was pretty rough.
Yeah.
Because, let's just say that. But I don't know. I'm thinking maybe part of it is that he needs to get the people in place too, the front office people, the talent evaluators before he goes out after.
Yeah.
New players to fill all those holes. Because he's going to have to be creative to do it. Because
I'm looking forward to winter meetings just to see what the hell he's going to do.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe he knows something we don't know.
Yeah, well, I hope so. That's why he was hired.
I would hope. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. In other non-breaking news, and news we all expected to hear, Miguel Cabrera has all but confirmed 2023 will be his swan song. He was speaking to an MLB.com reporter this past week, and Cabrera said, I think it's going to be my last year. It feels a little weird to say that. I think it's time to say goodbye to baseball. Obviously, I mean, he's been a shadow of himself the last 5 years. Cabrera will enter his likely final season. He right now ranks 25th in Major League Baseball history with 3,088 hits and 27th in Major League history with 507 home runs. This was unexpected news, but I guess it's also, I'm glad he's finally accepting the end of his career. You know, and obviously he has 40 million reasons to play out this last year.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm just not. My worry is it's just going to be an ugly, ugly season with him. You know, he can't stay healthy. He can't get around on the fastball anymore. He's, you know, for a long time they said he wasn't clogging up the roster. Well, that is kind of starting to happen now with guys who could take his place. You know, so I'm just glad this is it, and he's not. You know, I guess the big fear of him that he would try to string it out, you know, play out the string with another organization next, you know, like in 2024. Mm-hmm. And that's the last thing I want to see of a guy like Cabrera. If, you know, have a swan song with the Tigers, walk out with your head held high, even if you do struggle, and then, God forbid, don't sign another contract with another team. Don't do it.
Yeah, I was surprised it was now made official. I thought it was always a foregone conclusion that this upcoming season would be his last.
He's hinted at it and kind of then walked it back. I think this is the first time he's actually said, "I think I'm done." But it would have been nice if he would have said this a few years ago. I'm sure the Tigers still would have paid him. They would have worked something out. But it's been a shame to watch such a great player become just a shell of himself over the past 5-6 years.
It is, and I don't think he's going to do like what Pujols did. Yeah. That was kind of a freak of nature that all of a sudden he found his stroke in the last 2-3 months of the season, and you know, managed to get to 700 home runs.
Yeah, and no one saw that coming. I go, no way he's going to get 700, and he crossed that barrier fairly easily. But yeah, he went on an absolute tear. But also that the Cardinals were using him correctly. He wasn't playing every day. He was essentially a platoon player. He only went against certain pitchers. And it really worked out for the best. And he was able to have a nice, end to his career because, he's the same way. Those years with the Angels, I won't say it tarnished his career, but it definitely takes a bit of a shine off the stats. And that's what's happened with Cabrera as well.
Yeah, I mean, Pujols' production dropped as soon as he went to the Angels. Yeah. It changed like right away. I don't blame him for going there. He had like 200 million reasons to go there.
Yeah,
and again, Cabrera, I think the only reason he's staying is because that's such a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And now this year, hopefully I'm going to guess from what I've read that they're going to use him in certain situations, but not rely on him. He's not going to be an everyday player. Mm-hmm. Maybe he'll play once or twice at first base, but otherwise probably just DH is my guess.
Yeah, you're right. I could see him maybe starting the last game of the regular season at first base or something like that. Exactly. Yeah, have some ceremonial games where he's on the field for an inning or two, or he bats first. Put him first in the lineup for a game so he can get the ovation, and then he can bat and then you pull him and stuff like that. There are ways to make this happen, but yeah, you're right. He can't play. There's no way they can play him. 300 at bats would be too much. He can't hold. His body can't hold up.
I mean, his back has been hurting like forever. Yeah. His knees.
His knee is probably worse.
Exactly, and a big guy like that goes, swinging for the fences. Mm-hmm. Yeah. At age 40 is a really different thing than at age 25. So, and it'll give him a chance this year also for opposing teams to kind of give him a little farewell ceremony here and there. And I think Pujols was getting that too in the past. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised. And the Tigers have holes anyway. So he's honestly, before he got hurt, he was still a better hitter than a lot of the rest of the team last year.
Yeah, for about 6 weeks. And then he broke down completely.
Yeah, basically. The injury got him again, and then he had to be shut down. Or he could be playing third base this year. That's why they didn't need Candelario.
Oh, good Lord. Don't give them any ideas.
I wouldn't put it past the Vila, but I think Harris might be a little bit smart. So...
All right. One more topic before we essentially wrap this puppy up, and we'll talk a little Pistons real quick, and specifically Cade Cunningham. There's a lot of talk his season may be over before it really even got going. The Pistons' Fry's second-year guard, the first overall pick last year, has missed the past 10 games with left shin soreness, and there is a possibility he has played his last game of the year. Reports are it's a stress fracture, and Cunningham is mulling over two options, one being season-ending surgery, or the other being extended rest, but he would still miss a significant portion of the season. Obviously, though, as I said, surgery would end this year. He would not come back till next year. Considering the Pistons are 5-17, well, they're going to be 5-18 after tonight. They're down 28 to the Knicks right now. They're last in the East. They're trending towards a very high draft pick, depending on the lottery. Looks like the tank may be back on for one more season, despite the Pistons coming into the scene saying, we're done tanking, we're going to start ramping things up. But you can't predict injuries. And it's not just Cunningham. I mean, they've lost Isaiah Stewart, missed this good portion of time with a bad toe. I think Bogdanovich isn't playing tonight. He hasn't played the last few games with the injuries. Alec Burks missed the first part of the season because of injuries. Marvin Bagley missed the first month or so of the season. They have been beset with injuries. And obviously the biggest now being Cade Cunningham, the man they plan to build around, but between him and Ivy. So I hate to say the tank's back on. I don't think they have a choice in the matter this time.
I don't know if they were ever deliberately trying to tank. I think they're just a bad team.
Bad team, yeah. That's a better way to put it, yeah.
Because if you think about it, I don't know, anybody that tanks for real deliberately should be fired, to be honest.
I hate tanking culture. I really do.
I hate it too. I'm sure the Philadelphia 76ers fans were miserable for a few years when they deliberately tried.
And they never did get a championship out of it, and they probably won't at this point.
No, I mean, they are a lot better team. They have a good coach.
But essentially, they got one player out of that tank, in Joel Embiid. And that's it.
Exactly. Everybody else was acquired from trades and free agency.
Yeah, and most of them either were a bust or they've moved on for them, like Ben Simmons.
Exactly. Yeah. So, honestly, I don't know what's going on with the Pistons, and I'm bummed because I think out of all the spectator sports, I like hockey and basketball the best, just to watch. Yeah. And I really miss the Pistons being good. Yeah. And so.
Yeah, I said because
it's been really tough.
I'm old enough where I went to games at Cobo Arena. Back when I was a kid. In front of 5,000 people, nobody. But I got to see, Dave Bing and Bob Lanier play in the flesh. But yeah, I mean, I saw the Pistons play there. I saw them play at the Silverdome, which was that was something else when they were playing at the Silverdome. And you were way up there in the upper reaches of the dome. There's a itty bitty postage stamp there. But back then they were just giving away tickets for free at the gas stations and shit. So, but I'm old enough to have. Lived through the Bad Boys eras, which is still I think my favorite era of sports period in this town. I love that mid 80s to early 90s Pistons era. That was so much fun to watch, and you got to watch that team literally, build. I remember that the draft that started all when they got Isaiah Thomas and Kelly Tripucka, and then they traded for Bill Laimbeer. They got rid of Kent Benson. And it kind of took off from there, but they also had a very smart GM, and Trader Jack McCloskey, and they literally hit gold on Daddy Rich. How come I'm forgetting the name of Daddy Rich?
Chuck Daly.
Chuck Daly, yes. So, I'm with you there. I would love the Pistons to be relevant again. Love them to be relevant again. But at times it's so painful to watch because they're so young, obviously, and young teams just don't win in the NBA. But they look so inept on offense at times, and for that matter, defense. And that's another thing. If you're old enough to remember the Bad Boys, and for that matter, the Going to Work era teams, which were also fun to watch in a different way. They could play defense. They could get stops when they needed stops. We're not seeing it at all with the current Pistons right now, at all. And that's in Detroit, you got to play defense because that's part of the Pistons' identity. You got to play defense.
Yeah, and I grew up with the sports teams in the 80s. That's the ones I remember. And so for sure I remember the bad boys, and every year they got just a little bit closer, scratching and clawing their way to the championship. And
oh yeah, I can hear Bird Stole the Ball in my damn dreams. Oh my God, that was just horrible to watch. Oh my God.
But they bounced back, and then they beat them the next year.
That was a freaking gauntlet that team had to go through. Between the Celtics and then and the Lakers and the Bulls, and there was that was just a great. Again, I'm showing my age, because kids today just can't get over. How could you watch? Wasn't 80s basketball just guys getting in fist fights under the basket? No, I think that's what people forget about that era of basketball. Like the Pistons, all the people, the stereotype is the Bad Boys Pistons were just a bunch of thugs who hammered people and beat people up and intimidated their way to wins. Yet they either forget or ignore the fact that they were an elite offensive team. I mean, just look at the roster. They were an elite offensive team. They had a Hall of Fame backcourt with Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars. You had a prototypical stretch five in Bill Laimbeer. He was one of the first big men who could shoot 3-point shot. And then you had these rubber bands that came off the bench, energy guys, and then Dennis Rodman and John Sally. Of course the microwave. Vinnie Johnson was the prototypical. Heat. Just bring the heat off the bench and come off fire. And that was such a fun. Listen to us. We're just about that team. Well, but that I missed that kind of relevance. I really do.
Well, even with the going to work Pistons, they were a gritty team. They didn't have the biggest of superstars on that team, but as a team,
a sum greater than the parts.
Exactly, and it kind of the throat got cut when they got rid of what's his name,
Chauncey Billups.
And they brought in whatever
Allen Iverson.
That head case. And
that just kind of that was it right there. It kind of blew it up.
Exactly. I mean,
they were was never able to replicate those kind of moves again either. That it was like the Allen Iverson was just like the warning shot. He was going to start making bad moves, and every move he made after that just failed miserably.
Was a disaster. I mean, remember Josh Smith and what were you thinking?
Charlie Villanueva and oh my God,
Ben Gordon. So although Van Gundy didn't do much better bringing in Blake Griffin and
he gave us that. We got 1 year of Blake Griffin being elite Blake Griffin, that one season. But he essentially he put the Pistons on his shoulders and took them to the playoffs and essentially used up what he had left of his athleticism to do it. He's never been the same player since.
Basically.
Yeah, he essentially ruined his body that season just to get them to the playoffs. Then they got swept out by the Bucks anyway, and he could barely move because I remember him coming on the court with his knee bandaged up to the point where he could barely bend it.
That's his whole history was that way.
Yeah,
so
but
it's not like a surprise.
He was a joy to watch. I remember the 50-point game he had against Philadelphia. I was literally cheering on the couch watching him do that, and he would because it had been years since we'd seen the Pistons have a player who was capable of doing those kind of things. Probably the last one before that who had that kind of elite talent was probably Grant Hill. As good as the going to work guys were, none of them were as talented as Grant Hill. And Blake Griffin had that kind of talent, but he was built of glass, unfortunately.
Yeah. And with this team now, yes, they're young and I've watched some of their games. It seems like their game plan is in the first 5 minutes go down by 30 points. And then the rest of the time maintain a 20 or 30 point deficit.
Yeah, we're gonna play even Steven with you after we're down 30. Yeah.
After we give you the first 30.
Yeah.
And then it seems like their end of game strategy is let a poor shooting team just keep chucking threes, never anybody around the basket, and then go run to the other side to watch the other team score.
Yeah.
And I say that kind of harshly because I'm just wondering how much of it is the young guys, how much of it is coaching.
Yeah, right now it's kind of hard to say. It really is.
I have a hard time. It's like, why are these guys just kind of letting the other team score. It feels like it's uncontested.
Yeah.
When the Pistons have the ball, they look disorganized.
Mm-hmm.
It basically looks like a pickup game where you got one guy that's maybe a little bit better than the rest of the guys on the team, and say, okay, we'll let this guy score. And that was Cade Cunningham.
Yeah.
And they don't look like a team. Although I will say they had some good games when they did that West Coast trip just recently.
Yeah. They kind of got off the snide a little bit, and they managed to win a couple of games despite the injuries, but they've kind of come back to earth in the last couple of games since.
Yeah, and in my opinion, I like Cade Cunningham. He's a good player, and I'm bummed that he can't play.
Right.
At the same, and then he won't have time to gel with the other newcomers in there, like more time playing with Ivy.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think the one guy you don't want to go down is Jaden Ivey.
Yeah.
I watched some of his games. He is damn good. I think he's better than Cade, to be honest.
He's got the athleticism that Cade Cunningham doesn't have. The kid is just explosive off the dribble.
Right. I mean, and he just runs to that basket, and people are, like, he runs right by people.
Yeah, he is one of the few guys on the Pistons who can actually go to take the ball to the hoop and draw a foul.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he can shoot the free throw too.
Exactly.
So, and then the other guy that impresses me actually is Duran.
Yeah. He's still 18, I believe. Youngest kid in the league.
I know, and he's got a hell of a presence. He's aggressive on the boards, and which is nice to see versus the other guys who just seem to be watching the ball bounce off and are too busy running back to the. So, I don't know. I'm hopeful, but you got a young team, and I can't tell whether it's honestly coaching and youth. In there.
Yeah,
so.
And I guess we should touch on. I know I mentioned it to you before we started recording. Is the Saddiq Bey rumors? At the very least, that there was interest in Bey, and the Pistons were not ignoring the calls, so to speak. They're kind of. I won't say they're confirmed rumors, but they've been thrown. They've popped up on social media and I could and it makes sense. Would Saddiq Bey be part of this core long term? Still, I think the jury's still kind of on that. As much, as good as he's been a solid guy, and I think he's proven that he's a rotation piece on a good team. I mean, he is a legit NBA player, a 3-and-D type. But is he going to be a long-term fit for this Pistons core? And I think the jury's kind of out on that. And I can understand why the Pistons are at least willing to listen to offers on Bey. I guess the question is, if you trade Bey for more draft capital, is this just kicking the rebuild down the road another year or two?
If it's for draft picks, it probably is.
Yeah.
Because any rookie you bring in, it's going to take them time to really be an NBA player, with a few freak exceptions, basically. So, but if he's getting another NBA player out of it, or I think Troy Weaver's been pretty damn creative in some of his trades. I know certainly draft night. I watched draft night in the NBA just to see what the hell he would do. Yeah, because they've been creative
that first draft with him just going bonkers. It was amazing to see. It made the draft exciting, not know what the hell he was going to do.
That's right. I think that first year he had like 1 second round pick going into it, and then all of a sudden you got like, what? Yeah. It was.
Well, I guess what it is though is that the issue would have with it all depends on what the return is, because what they got out of Bey for a 19th overall pick, that's a home run. That's a home run draft pick. And as the old joke goes, you trade him for draft picks, you might get anything. Another Saddiq Bey even. So I guess that's the question. Do you think you can do better than Saddiq Bey? And that's a tough question to answer, because he's not a star, but he is a positive. He's a plus on any team he'd be on. It's just, but he's not going to be the guy you build around. But he is a guy who could be next to the guy, so to speak, or he can help
Mm-hmm.
the guy become better because he can shoot the 3-point ball, which not a lot of guys can in this team, even though he's having an off year. I don't know.
Right.
It's I trust what Weaver's done, even though some of the moves he's made in the past, like what was he thinking? And then a couple of more moves down the line, and go, oh, that's why he made that deal. Like the Jeremy Grant trade. People are like, he did what to get? Why did he trade him for that? And then the next thing you know, he's got Jalen Duren.
Yes.
Oh, that was his plan. So,
yeah.
I trust what he's going to do. It's just that there's the Pistons are such a train wreck right now. It's just maybe they're at the point where they've figured out, well, these it's just he's not going to work for us here. Maybe it's time to move him on and find someone who will, because right now, as we've said, the Pistons right now are, as you said, they're not tanking for the sake of tanking. They're just bad. And I don't think anybody saw them being this bad going into the year.
Yeah. Well, they have so many rookies, honest to God. I think I think they had a good acquisition in Bogdanovich.
Yeah.
And I think I haven't watched him play before this year, really, but he's really a solid NBA player.
He can shoot, which is something the Pistons lack, is a guy who can shoot from distance.
Well, that's the other, you bring up a good point. He can shoot, and he's confident
in the shot
when he shoots.
Yeah.
Like I was watching like Killian Hayes shoot.
Yeah.
That guy looks like he's waiting to get hit by a car.
Yeah.
I think he has not that he doesn't have talent. There's a reason he was a first-round pick.
Yeah.
And he may still pan out because he's pretty young. But right now, when he's playing, up until maybe the last couple games or so, he did not look confident.
Right.
And a lot of those guys don't look confident when they shoot. It's not pretty watching Beef Stew shoot a three-pointer.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't look confident when he's shooting.
Right.
It's almost like, are you sure you want me to do it? Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas you look at the, really solid NBA teams and shooters, they're like, I'm going to own you.
Yeah.
Right. You're not going to outdo me on this. So, and Bogdanovich has that confidence. I think Jaden Ivey has that too.
Right.
And you just need some confident shooters.
Exactly. And and that's something that's developed. These guys, most guys don't come in the league like that. Like Steph Curry wasn't Steph Curry, until about 4 or 5 seasons into his career.
Right. But what you're saying about Bay, going back to that, I think Troy Weaver with a 5-win team has to do something to get them to win. And I remember, let's go back to the Bad Boys Pistons era. McCluskey used to mix and match and trade and
no one saw the Adrian Dantley trade coming.
Right.
Yeah, and Dantley was an all-star caliber ball player.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they pick up Aguirre instead, and boom, for some reason that worked out.
Yeah.
And so if Troy Weaver is, putting them in a better position, he should trade him. Yeah. So, even though I liked him too, I like him as a player. He's solid.
It's just a question: is he, will he be in the mix? And this team is hopefully good in 5 years. So, and that's, maybe he's already made that decision. We'll see. So, all right, we need to wrap this up because we've already gone kind of long. So, who is your jerk of the week?
I thought about this. I can't think of any pro sport, but I do have one. Yeah. And I don't know if it's really FIFA itself or the nation of Qatar or the combination of the two.
They can both. They can be co-jerks of the week. Yes.
I think they should share the platform this time, because the World Cup as a sporting event, great. I have no problem with that. Let them play soccer, but outside of that, FIFA's been a shit show forever. That's like a. That's like if you're more corrupt than the Olympic Committee, says volumes. That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And then the Qatari government and all of the kind of stuff that they're like suddenly banning and getting all weird. I think the many teams wanted to like support LGBTQ, and Qatar said, "Well, hell no."
Yeah.
And then I don't know if this is a bad thing or not, but I thought it was really funny that last minute, the main sponsor of FIFA, Budweiser, was not allowed to sell beer at the games, which I thought was hysterical. And I mean, some people would say they're like, there's no way to watch that sport without beer. And, and then I think a lot of the slave labor that went into building facilities for the World Cup, but that's not unique to Qatar. I heard the same thing about, even of all places, Brazil.
Yeah.
Just kind of really, they built it for this. Somebody made money, and then these stadiums serve no purpose anymore. So I think for all of those, I think it distracts from the sport, and it's ugly and kind of the corruption. I just don't like corruption. So let me put it that way.
Yeah, it's
so, yeah.
You've nailed it with FIFA. FIFA is horribly, horribly, horribly corrupt. And we were just seeing, let alone the fact that, as I said, they put the World Cup in the winter, disrupting all of the professional seasons in Europe. They like the Premier League has to take 6 weeks off, because you can't play soccer in Qatar in July because you'll die because it's so goddamn hot.
Yes, exactly.
So, and even now, when I was watching the game today, and there was guys struggling out there. I mean, it's not a place where soccer should be played. And yeah, it's a good call with FIFA and Qatar and the whole horribly corrupt global organizations like FIFA and IOC. Yeah, I'm completely with you there. All right, my jerk of the week. There's always a lot to pick from, always a ton, but. My jerk of the week, I'm going to go back to college football, and I'm going with Auburn and Hugh Freeze. Hiring Hugh Freeze, the disgraced Hugh Freeze, who has a long and sordid history of rules violations, of being a sexual predator, of doing some horribly inappropriate things, and that the place he used to supposedly rehabilitate his image was Liberty University, which is essentially a Jerry Falwell created diploma mill for Bible thumpers.
Yep.
And yet Auburn hired him, despite all. Just look up Hugh Freeze online, and you'll see the stuff that he pulled at Ole Miss. You'll see the stuff he pulled at Liberty. You'll see the stories about him calling hookers on phones owned by the school.
Yep.
And all this is a guy who claims to be holier than thou, who always plays the religion card. I mean, it's such a bad hire that there are reports out there saying Auburn is demanding he relinquishes control of all his social media accounts in the fear he's going to do something stupid, like he did at Liberty when he went to the DMs of a sexual assault survivor on Twitter who was suing Liberty, and he went in and he approached her about that. Why? Oh, and the thing is, though, Cadillac Williams, who was the interim coach at Auburn, had gotten that fan base that had written off the season, and had gotten the fan base fired up and got some faith back in the Auburn. In the Auburn football, and yet they go and hire Hugh Freeze because he beat Saban twice when he was at Ole Miss. It's a horrible, horrible hire, and it's going to end badly. And the thing is, it's completely and totally avoidable. But we see this happen a lot with schools. And what's funny is that it just almost happened to Tennessee when Tennessee tried to hire Greg Schiano, who's now at Rutgers. And the fan base rebelled so viciously online that Tennessee backed off the hire. The fan base did this with Auburn, and they just went full forward with it. this is going to end horribly. I mean, a guy like Freeze does not change his stripes, not at his age, not with the history he has. So my jerk of the week is Auburn, Hugh Freeze, Liberty University, hell, the SEC too, for putting winning at all costs. He can beat Alabama, so who cares if he's a sexual pest? So that's my jerk of the week.
That's actually a really good one. I did read about him getting hired by Auburn.
Yeah.
Like yesterday or
he had his press conference this
something.
afternoon, and he's already playing the victim. So,
oh god,
oh my god. So big time college sports. As much as I enjoy it, this goes along with it. So, all right. With that, we got to get the hell out of here because I know it's probably like dinner time at your end. So,
yep.
Yeah, it's like, I'm hungry. All right. Why don't you tell everybody where they can maybe find you online or anything you want to push or anything else you want to add?
Yeah, but the only time I'm online really is on Twitter.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty active talking about
Detroit sports. Actually there's a very active Detroit sports Twitter.
It is actually, and I think I spend way too much time on there, and my handle is simply at Nick Milanovich.
Yeah.
You'll hear me going back and forth with Greg and with a bunch of other guys and a lot of us are old grizzled Detroit fans who remember the 80s and the Pistons and the Tigers and the Red Wings and
Greg going scorched earth on the cornbread eating Lions fans who are buying into the moral victories.
Oh yeah. There's no shortage of that. It's a real big divide between the young guys probably born in the late 90s, if not the 2000s, and us saying, well, we've seen that like 50 times already.
Exactly. All right, and of course. So I'll put a link in the show notes. As always, you can find the Knee Jerks on Twitter. I believe it's at the Knee Jerks. We're on Facebook. If you want to join the Facebook group, our homepage is thekneejerks.net. That where you can find all the show notes, all the links, and you can actually download the MP3 to do what you will there. As always, we can be found on all the usual podcasting aggregators such as Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public. There's numerous. Essentially, if there's a place that hosts podcasts, just do a search for the Knee Jerks. Do a search for Eno and Big Al, and then you can subscribe to the podcast via that app. As always, as I say, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know what you think of Nick. Because we'll see if we can continue to give him some periodic appearances from the Pacific Northwest after Greg gets his stuff sorted out. But Greg is probably going to be back on the next show in a couple weeks. We'll wait and see. Honestly, look at Twitter. I'll link to Greg's Twitter as well, and he'll let you know what's going on with his end, and then we'll be back on the show. So until then, I'm out of breath, and I need to call it a night. So, and Nick's hungry. So
that's right.
Yeah, we'll see you in 2 weeks. So until then, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha, and say good night, Nick.
Good night, Nick. Sorry, that was right there. Good night, everybody.